Thank you for being here this evening. Dan, have you begun the recording?
The recording just started.
Excellent. I normally introduce dignitaries. I see here Councilmember Kevin McDonald, Assistant Planning Manager Brittany Bendix, Climate Action Commission member Ned Orrit. I think that covers the dignitaries, at least as we define them in Petaluma. Most of you have been here before, but for the few of you who haven't, I will tell you, Know Before You Grow is a committee of Petaluma Urban Chat. The mission statement for both organizations has 4 pillars to it: housing to meet community needs, more non-automotive transportation alternatives, climate action, and sustainable municipal finances. Tonight, we're going to have a topic that really touches all 4 of those: provides housing, focuses or allows non-car transportation, good for city finances, and by living close together, it's good for climate action. It's exactly the kind of project we like. The project is called the 890 CoOp project. With us are Matthew Ridgway, the developer of the project, and Otto Condon, his architect. Matthew will talk a little about why cooperative housing there and elsewhere, and then a little about his own project. Otto will talk a little bit about why the project fits into the site. At the end of their presentation, we will have time for questions and answers. I often handle that task, but I'm actually part of the team with Otto and Matthew, putting together the land use application. So for cleanliness, I will stay away from handling the Q&A. Dan Like will do that instead. Dan, who is also our facilitator this evening. The best way for you to ask a question would be to go to the chat function at the bottom, hover your mouse toward the bottom, chat pops up, click on that, and type your question in, whether to everyone or just to Dan. Either way works. Dan will take a look at those at the end of the evening or end of the presentation and start reading them off to the development team. With that, I will turn the floor over to Matthew.
Thank you, Dave. Nice to be here, and thank you all for being here on a night that I know that you've all been watching too many flat screens already. Before I start, I should introduce my partner and wife in this venture is Dawn Hagstead, who has chosen not to be on video, but she is here and can answer questions with voice if you have any for her as well. We have had a passion around cooperative housing for a couple of decades, or at least a decade now, around wanting to live in community with people that we love, and the idea that you live in community with a bunch of people, preferably of multiple generations, and you essentially are able to look after the older folks that might need a little extra care, as well as the younger folks who may have issues affording housing anywhere in the Bay Area at this point. We have 3 sons, all in their 20s, and we are hoping that they will be part of this cooperative housing project with us if they choose to do that. We also both have aging parents that we would, if they choose to be a part of this and are physically able to be part of this, we would like them to be part of it as well. So that was sort of our vision, and we honestly were looking in communities. We were looking in West Oakland and areas of Richmond, the Iron Triangle of Richmond, if you know that area, because we thought initially that we really wanted to be in the heart of a district where there really was a need for employment and for affordable housing. And we still have that vision around not wanting to just be a housing complex, but to also be a generator of jobs. But we did sort of settle on Petaluma as being the location that probably has a bit of that edginess to it, especially the district particularly that we're looking at. For this one, if you know the area, the site is essentially the southeast corner of Payran and Petaluma Boulevard North, an area that does have a fairly high transient population, including people who I think are living on our site at present. And so that's not, and there's also a pretty strong element of affordable housing, which we're extremely happy to be in and amongst. And so we're hoping that we can create job opportunities and housing opportunities and entrepreneurial opportunities for all of those people. And I think we also sort of hit on Petaluma as the final resting place of this, just by virtue of sort of having other friends and family in and near that area. And then I have done a lot of work in Petaluma historically. So I'm a transportation planner by trade for a private engineering and planning firm that worked on the city's last general plan and the city's traffic model, the city's fee program, which I'm now maybe regretting since I'm going to be paying those fees. So have a lot of experience in Petaluma. For the last 4 years, my wife Dawn and I have both been in Washington, D.C., where we went to open an office for the company that I work for. And we've just returned literally just a couple weeks ago. We're really happy to be back. And it also gives us some extra shot in the arm around helping to make this project come to pass. We do have other ambitions beyond just employment and housing. We also would like this to be very ecological. We would like it to be very affordable. So you'll note when Otto shows the site plans that the units are all pretty small, really small by American standards. And the idea is that that this is family housing, and that many families of lesser means actually live in very compact housing. And that's the type of housing that we're talking about building here. And one of the benefits that we have by making the units smaller is that we have more space to put into a cooperative or communal space. So we have a large kitchen and dining space. The dining space will probably double and triple as a co-working space during the day, entertainment space during the night, whatever else other uses we can make of it. There's also, as Dave and Dan were just joking about, a workshop. So we would love to have both the metal and wood shops as part of this. And then we have a workout space. But the biggest communal space is actually all of the gardens. So we're intending to grow at least a part of our own food as part of this. And the biggest garden is that we'll put a garden on one of the rooftops. You'll see it in Otto's rendering. Just a bit about outreach. So we have done an outreach process where we've already done a workshop, I guess about 2 weeks ago that we hosted. Before we did that, we sent out mailers to about 400 residents, anybody who was within 1,000 feet. We got the mailing list from the city if you haven't been by the site, you should go see it. We've painted the windows and linked and put the name of the website on there for people to refer to it. We have received already about 13 comments and responses to all of those, including some via phone calls, but mostly via either email or people returning postcards that we included in the mailers. With a pretty even split, I'd say. I think my last count was 13 back. Maybe it was 14 back. It was like 7 against, 6 for, and 1 neutral or something like that. So, but I was pleased just to have some people in support of it, because it's not usually the type of thing that people will return a postcard if they're actually supporting a project. So that's what we've done to date. And then I guess the only other thing I wanted to note before I turn it over to Otto to talk about the uses that we're proposing is sort of what has been there historically. So it is currently an abandoned Sonic fast food restaurant. It has been vacant, I think, for 5 years, but I don't know its exact history. I think it was also a pizza place, and it might have been other restaurants in the interim years. And back in the 80s, it was actually a Chevron gas station. It did already get cleaned up, so they took away all the leaky underground storage tanks and have remediated the site. So we're not worried about contamination, but I just want to make the point that this is not a greenfield. It really is an infill development on a site that's underutilized. And we hope that what we're proposing would be a net benefit to the community, as well as a net benefit to us in terms of helping us to build a really affordable and a communal project. I said that was the last thing, but one other thing, which is this, that we were actually going to submit our application to Brittany and the city late last week, and then we pushed it to early this week as we waited for preliminary bids from contractors, because we really want to make sure that we can afford to build what we're talking about here. And those bids have come in higher than we expected. So we are in the process of sort of rethinking this a little bit in terms of scale and trying to lower expenses, and we're also going to probably sign one of those contractors onto a pre-construction agreement and really sort of dig into what are the factors that are driving these costs up. So what Otto's going to show you is what is the thing I really would love to be able to build, and we may have to end up scaling it back a bit just to be able to afford it. And I think that also, Brittany, from your perspective, means that we're probably at least a couple weeks away from actually submitting our application to the city. So we do not currently have an application pending with the city yet, which maybe is good, because if you guys have suggestions that we can incorporate, then we still have time to do that. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Otto.
Thank you, Matthew. And good evening, everybody. I will share my screen now. Let's see. And can everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Okay.
I think so.
And sometimes my internet's not the best. So if I fade out, just raise your hand or let me know. So I will. So as Matthew was described, mentioning the site, which you all know, it's the old Sonic driveway. Just for clarification, it does not include the retail buildings that wrap around it, which is a separate property. And on this page, we have 4 views looking from all the directions. And I think one of the things that stood out when we were looking at it was the silo that's west of the intersection. Really kind of marks that, I would say, the edge of, this is really kind of the gateway into the downtown Petaluma. So it's really a transition into the more, what looks like the historical agricultural parts of Petaluma. So that's interesting for this site. But you can see it from these photos, it's relatively small scale. There are some street trees, and there's a lot of pavement with the roads. That is pretty much the predominant impression. So the first thing was looking at the site, and here's a illustrative plan of the ground level. The program does include retail, work-live space, the community spaces, as Matthew mentioned, and then a variety of housing types, which is really intended to serve a diverse population, including town or 2-story lofts, 2-story apartments, flats, and also some guest rooms for the tenants, guests. So that's, and I'll talk about the size later, but one of the things to break down the scale was to really break it into 3 smaller buildings and also to orient around a central courtyard so that it really has a focus on the communal space. And so I'll be referencing the Petaluma building, which is really oriented towards Petaluma, Bayran, which is the live work and flats, and the South Common building. And on this site, you'll see the property line includes an easement for the adjacent properties. We've included all surface parking, 12 spaces for the developments on the south side, and all the parking is intended to be pervious in order to address stormwater management. We are decreasing the level of impervious materials in terms of the civic work that's been done. So, we're trying to improve the site with development. Also including Payran Street, there's the opportunity because of the lane widths to include on-street parking, which will both act as a traffic calming. It'll reinforce the development, the uses, and in addition to that, there's also the opportunity, which is being looked at for including extending the bike lane adjacent to the on-street parking. You'll see on this illustration, we're also looking at increasing the number of street trees, also incorporating them with stormwater planters so that, we're once again trying to pick up and clean the stormwater before it goes and dumps into the sewer system, or sanitary system. And, trying to create a more vital, we've pulled the building back along Petaluma to actually create more opportunities for a good through pedestrian zone, opportunities for the retail to spill onto the sidewalk and create cafe areas, and have even included some built-in, as part of an integrated seating with the tree wells in order to just further reinforce the street activity and opportunities, and just quality of the streetscape. Actually, these are some sections which illustrate 3 sections. The first one here is the parking. We're going to do pervious paving, cobblestones to define the parking against the building. One of the things with Matthew's desire to have a cidery, and we're looking at using living fences of Gravenstein apples, espaliers, in order to define the edge to really, further, I think, celebrate the agricultural history of Petaluma. On the Payran Street, which has the work-live spaces, we're expanding what are now basically about 3x3 foot tree wells to be full tree wells for stormwater runoff. An enhanced landscape setback for the building within there's a 5 foot setback for utilities, and still maintaining a 4 foot minimum sidewalk, so that with the trees, so that it's far more pedestrian friendly. And here along Petaluma is where we're really trying to expand the public space along Boulevard to both create a really incredible landscape and tree buff tree zone with integrated seating, a 6 feet to 12 feet actually through pedestrian zone, and then still maintain about 3'6" for opportunities for the frontage zone, so that businesses can spill out, set up tables or sales or whatever they want to do to order in order to sort of reinforce the public life of the street. In terms of the plans, here's the plans as they sit now. And the Petaluma building is a retail building. We are looking at it being for the construction, we're looking at a CLT, cross-laminated timber, which is overall it's 3 stories, but with cross-laminated timber, it's you can create like really great space by having the exposed wood on the ceilings, exposed structure. It passes all the fire codes, and it's really a high quality experience for interior space for the retail. So we feel more like a wood loft, a post and beam type loft. But that's the retail space. Along Payran, we have 4 work-live units, and they could be built with, on the ground floor, they might include a small kitchen and a bathroom. The upper story would be a half loft. So it could also function for artists or anyone who might want to have a home office or a home workshop. And then as Matthew was mentioning, there's the amenity or community building, which includes a large common space, an exercise area, and a workshop. The second story is on Petaluma. There's 2-story lofts and 2-story townhouses on the common building with a roof garden on the 2nd floor. And then on the 3rd story, there's flats above the 2-story work-live lofts. As Matthew mentioned, the sizes are relatively small. The 2-story lofts average about 800 square feet. The work-live lofts are 845 square feet. The flats are around 425 square feet. So they're really intended to provide efficient space, because there will be the community space, but also more affordable space. Here's a view of the rooftop. And as Matthew mentioned, it's like we're looking at the opportunity for having some roof terraces on the Payran building. And the Payran building is actually 30 feet high, where currently it's 30 feet high. The Petaluma and the community building would be 35 feet high, which are within the code. But as Matthew mentioned, these are opportunities for raised gardens, for doing production, for growing vegetables for the residents. It also is an opportunity to have the terraces sort of cascade down with the lower courtyard, with the mid-level courtyard, and then the rooftop garden. So there's a lot of visual communication between the floors. And we're also looking at the roofs that aren't occupied will be include solar panels, and also we'll do white membrane roofing to reduce the heat gain on the roofs. Here's a view from the corner, an aerial view, corner of from Petaluma and Payran. And as you can see, this is the Petaluma building. Trying to keep it relatively simple with making some it's like bay projections into the retail corner to break up the facade. It is pretty, we've tried to make it as, these are the lofts, so making it more transparent to really, engage the street. They have balconies facing the street. The Payran, here's the 2-story work-live units with the flats above. And again, for the perimeter along the street, we try to create some balconies so that the residents could, provide the eyes in the street and really reinforce the sort of interaction with Petaluma and Payran. But the real the other focus of the public space is also on the and so here you can see there's the courtyard. Well, actually, I'll walk you through it. So off of Petaluma is the main door, and right now we're looking at it being, we're showing just a generic metal, but the idea is it could be more of a sculptural metal entry gate, entry fence. Here's the edge along the parking, which is the escalated apple trees. The buildings are centered around this courtyard. The community building is intended to basically have really large garage doors so that on nice days, the garage doors can open and the uses can spill out both in the big courtyard, and then the wood shop will be able to spill out into the parking area. And here you can see the second floor above the common is one of the rooftop gardens. And then on Payran up in this area is the third really public space with the raised gardens and a small public deck for the residents. We do have an elevator which provides access to the top floor. In terms of materials, we did take some inspiration from the silo. So looking at more, I'll say industrial, agricultural metal. And so here in Petaluma, we're showing Core-10 metal. And on the Payran side, it's more corrugated metal. And then on the community building, we're actually showing wood siding, and it's a blackened wood. It's a Japanese, it's actually burned, which is a preservative. And so, we're trying to, use high quality materials in a simple manner so to keep it affordable. And the last slide, which I think is really, I always love the before and afters. So these two slides show the top image is, if you're looking up, looking north in Petaluma, the site is right here. You can just barely see the drive-in north of Ambrosia. And this is the 890 Co-op fit into the site, showing out really an anchor the corner of Petaluma and Payran. And it's still, with the streetscape, it actually strengthens the landscape character of the street. I think that the scale is really in tune with the adjacent buildings. It's not overbearing. And at all, but it does create, as I mentioned before, this seems like the main, from an outsider's point of view, the intersection is really kind of that cusp of the entry into the, is a mile south of downtown. So it really does start to create the feeling of entering from the north, the transition into downtown Petaluma. So with that, I will turn it back to Matthew and Dan for questions. Thank you.
I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat, and the only comment we have here is Charlene said, "I really like this." So Kevin McDonald asks, "What's the housing organization?"
And so let me clarify the question. If you mean by housing organization, like is this operated by a nonprofit or the like, there isn't one. If you mean housing organization as in how is the housing organized, then I think what we're anticipating is that anybody who lives within the space, including the work-live spaces, will be members of the cooperative housing and will sign on to essentially an agreement around how it is we maintain the space and maintain the gardens. So Otto calls it a highly amenitized apartment building. I guess I think of it as a little bit more of a shared responsibility for owning and operating the spaces. We did form a separate, I should say, I've never done this before. I've never bought a property and developed one before. I've never formed an LLC. So sometimes when I say things, I'm like, I can't believe I'm saying that. And this is one of those instances. We did form a separate LLC in order to purchase the property. So the property is owned in the name of that organization. And at present, Dawn and I are the only owners of that LLC. And we have contemplated whether we would allow others to join us in membership of the LLC, in which case that would be a way in which people could join us in ownership of the cooperative. But we're still trying to figure sort of how that works logistically and the like. If it's okay, Dan, there's two things that Otto sort of triggered me that I forgot to mention. One is that we do have an ambition around hopefully occupying the retail space, or at least a portion of it, to open our own cidery. As we've said earlier, there's sort of the resources, the financial resources to build this are in question. So the financial resources to open a cidery are even more in question, but hopefully we can pull it all together and be able to afford to do that. And we would love to grow, make cider out of Gravenstein apples and find just the right yeast to make a great cider in that area. And then the other thing I failed to mention is just when we're talking about opportunities to create jobs, we really do view both the cidery as well as the work-live spaces. And you'll notice we're calling them work-live rather than live-work as real job creation opportunities. I think most of the live-work opportunities in Petaluma have been primarily live. And we would like these really to be primarily work. So the frontages along Payran is a big window that has sort of a retail appearance to it. The idea is that people could open small service buildings in that, or service employment opportunities in that. They could artists could occupy that space and do their artwork there, as well as sell it there. There's sort of multiple ways that people could use that space, and that is not space that we have programmed. That is, we don't have family and friends that have spoken for that yet. And so that is something we're looking for. We're hoping that entrepreneurs within the Petaluma community will have great ideas about how to use that space and will join us in community here.
Claudia asks, how many units?
There are presently 13 units. We will see how many have to get scaled back if the construction costs continue to come in at the rate that they've been coming in. I'm hopeful that we can actually scale back the size of the units a little further. And so I suspect we'll lose a couple of units. And I also think we'll probably lose units that are on the larger size. And so it'll sort of drag down or lower the average square foot per unit.
Ned asks, and I think we have the answer to this, but assume the building will be fully electric, heating, cooking, laundry, and all that?
That is the city's indication to us, is that that'll be the requirement. I'm sorry, I'm going to be completely honest with you, because I would prefer to cook with gas. I would prefer to have a building that's heated with gas. I think that's a more efficient use, but I understand that's the city's practice. And if the city insists that we do electric, we will do electric.
We have, on that point, as you can see in the renderings, knowing that it's one of the requirements for a SPAR submission, we're assuming electrical mini split units. So they'd all be on the roof. We've even tried to hide them, with the panels or with the guardrails for the roof deck, so that they become, less obtrusive, or actually visually they won't even be evident from the street. That is, recognizing, I think, on the first call, the city said that soon it'll be all electric. So.
Kevin asks, so you'll rent some work units separate from the living units?
No, they're work-live, so they're combined units. The expectation is that people would both live and work there. Yeah, I suppose if somebody wanted to, I don't know what regulations are in place that in terms of who can occupy it. If somebody wanted to use it exclusively as a workspace, and that was permitted within the zoning, I think that we would allow that, but that's not how we're anticipating it would be used. We're anticipating it's people who will live in a small portion of that space and probably have some of it be flexible, so they're both living and working in it, and that all those units hopefully will have a work component to them.
Other question from Kevin about, are all the accesses internal or some external? Looks like there's a walk-up on the Petaluma building, but.
It is, you said access, right? Yeah. Basically the entry is off of Petaluma, and then there's an entry off the parking lot. It is all exterior stairs, exterior corridors, so that all the units are grouped. Let's see. I guess you can't really see it, but all the unit entries are oriented towards the circulation walkways that wrap around the courtyard.
With the exception of the work-live, which are oriented towards Payran.
Yeah, and the first floor has So the retail is oriented towards Petaluma, and there is access off the Courtyard. The work live is oriented towards Payran, but there's access off the Courtyard also on those units. And then like on the second floor, all the units are, the brown is basically the corridor for the second floor, which is at 15 feet to connect these two buildings. So all the front doors are facing the corridor, and we've actually incorporated some built-in planters so that we can get some green screens along the units too, along with some select windows in order to just further reinforce the green intent of the building. And then this is at 20 feet on top of the flats, this is the one walkway. So it has basically all the doors are focused towards the public space.
And all the units have kitchens?
Yep.
They will all have at least kitchenettes. Like I can see the really the small ones, Otto said, being very efficient kitchens, but they will all have their own ability to cook. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all, the lofts are, the 2-story units are 1.5 baths. The other units are either 1 bath or 3/4 bath. And still, I think Matthew and Don, we're still talking about, well, you know, do people really want baths, or should we put showers in there? And, you know, that's kind of, you know, I think the studios might have showers, but.
Yeah, what we've talked about is because of the elevator, and talked a little bit about some of the wanted to be multi-generational, is that we really want to design the flats so that they're accessible units. And so those might be shower units rather than tub units.
Right. Well, I'm really liking it.
That's good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I also did fail to mention that even though it's our ambition to build this as affordably as possible, and so we hope this project is affordable in general, despite the early contractor bids, we are also complying with the city's inclusionary housing policy. So if we build 13 units, 2 of them will be probably very low income. And if we end up scaling this back in order to fit it within a budget, then that might adjust a little bit, but we will comply with the city's inclusionary housing practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as someone who lives in a 768 square foot house, I appreciate the small units.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about development schedule? I know it's slipping right now, but in general.
Yeah. Sure, I'll try. We are hoping to submit this year. We would love to. I think our original. You probably know this better than I do, Dave, or at least by heart. I think we were looking at April. Actually, I have a timeline right here. Environmental assessment starting sort of towards the end of the year, and formal public meetings in March and April, and then hopefully we could get approval towards April. Maybe that's going to slip towards May at this point of 2021. And then we have a separate process about preparing construction drawings and getting building permits. And so I think it's probably at least another 18 months beyond then before we would have anything that's ready to occupy. And I can see it slipping beyond that as well, just in terms of, we're hearing all sorts of things about how busy contractors are and the like right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we've lost quite as many homes locally as we did 2 years ago, but that always puts demand on things.
Yep.
Claudia asks, going back to the kind of ownership and how do you get in model, have you thought about CCRs or other self-governing concepts?
We have, probably not enough. So Dawn keeps also putting that in my ear. We need to really document sort of what are our criteria for having people as members. If we don't get along with people in community, how do we deal with that? What are the opportunities for ownership and the like? So there are a lot of resources on that. Otto shared some with me. And so I think we're going to primarily rely on other cooperative housing projects in the area for their sort of governance. If anybody has any that they think are models, we'd love to use them as sort of a starting point. I will say that when we started out, we really hoped that we could sell a bunch of units, almost like condos. But nobody that we have wanted to work with thus far, from our architect to our engineer to the contractors, will work on any condos. I guess the liability risk associated with that is just so tremendous that nobody will agree to work for us if we say we're building condos. So that's one of the reasons that we're looking at, could we sell shares in the LLC as a basis for people to buy into the building, but not necessarily call it a condo. So if anybody has any ideas on how to best sort of navigate those waters, we would like to give people opportunities to own. And we also need to find contractors and architects and engineers that will work for us.
If I could jump in, when you mentioned finding resources for co-housing management, CC&Rs, et cetera, the person who asked the question is actually one of those resources. She lives in a co-housing project west of Petaluma. So when she asked the question, she was speaking from a basis of knowledge. I can make the introduction between you two.
That'd be great.
Kevin asks, what was the city feedback? Is this compliant with IZO, and will it be easy to get through the city?
The city's been very receptive, including things around needing to modify the median potentially in Payran in order to add the on-street parking and continue the bike lane, and receptivity to that. And we've had preliminary conversations about how we're going to adhere to the inclusionary housing policies. We've had good conversations around adherence to the zoning practices. So I think that's all going really well. But if I understand the process right, I think we will have to go to Planning Commission twice, and we'll have to go to City Council twice for approvals. So it will require, there is some discretion on mostly the electeds and the appointeds part about whether this project will go forward or not.
And yeah, how many parking spaces per unit?
So if it continues in the 13 unit format that we're talking about now, there are 12 off-street parking spaces along the southern edge that Otto was showing. There's, and then we're hoping we can get one additional space on the site. So it would be essentially 1 unit per dwelling unit. And then one of the exceptions we're likely to need, as we meet the inclusionary housing, we're allowed to get exceptions to zoning. There wouldn't be additional off-street parking to satisfy the retail component of this. And so even though we would be creating the 5 parking spaces on Payran, the city has indicated that within this area, there's no precedent for using on-street parking to satisfy a project's off-street parking requirement. There is some precedent for that within the central Petaluma area, but not within this area. And so we would be seeking an exception on that one. Is that the right word, Dave?
A concession is the word.
Concession, thank you. A concession on the off-street parking requirements. And we've also heard from some of the adjacent business owners concern about parking, and I think it's pretty justified. So we are looking into ways we can solve that, including potentially, well, I know we're gonna do unbundled parking, where we essentially charge extra for anybody who wants to park here, as a basis to try to discourage people from owning vehicles, or at least owning multiple vehicles. We also have contemplated whether we would essentially operate a 2-vehicle fleet that's available for everyone's use, as a basis to say, you don't need to have a car here, you could just use one of these 2. So what we, and then, yeah, we have also explored options with adjacent property owners about whether we could lease space from them, with no success thus far on that.
And Jordan asks, any space set aside for bicycle parking?
So yeah, I'm a big cyclist, and I know that it's hyper important to the city of Petaluma. One of the things I wrote was the city's parking guidelines, including your bike parking guidelines. So yeah, there is Otto. If you can remind me where it is at this point. I know it's in the common building. I think it's in the southeast corner.
Well, there's a few places we've had parking. We have included areas along the streetscape for bike racks, more for public parking. And then within the development, we had a couple places we haven't quite settled on, but we were thinking some near the entry within the courtyard. Also some potentially in the common building, or within the courtyard, protected under the stairs. So there's a lot of opportunity for resident bike, but also for biking along the streetscape. We just haven't quite nailed it down.
Kevin notes you're half a block from the Peyron's Smart Path, which will extend to downtown, which
Yep.
would be a wonderfully bike accessible property.
Well, and we're also not that far from the Lynch Creek Path, which is another wonderful.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a nice,
Yep.
it's well situated from a bike perspective.
Yeah, and walkable to the supermarket.
Yep. We're hoping the city will extend the road diet on Petaluma Boulevard north to Peyran at some point or beyond.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any further questions in the Ned notes the Bounty Farm is nearby as well.
Is that what the farm, it's just north and west of us is, adjacent to, I guess, north of the Lucky's?
Yeah, I haven't been there, but I believe that's the Petaluma Bounty farm
Okay.
stand. And
Yeah, we're really interested in learning more about them. We don't know what that's about yet.
that's, I have heard things, but I'm not super familiar with them. And cool. Well, I don't see any further questions on the chat here. Any closing words, and then I can get this video off and uploaded, and we can push that around, and we can all recover a little bit from our Zoom fatigue and our debate fatigue and all of those other fatigues.
Well, I'll just jump in for a moment to thank everyone for being here. I will note that one of the council candidates, Lizzie Wallach, did join us during the meeting. Glad you can make it. And then also 2 weeks from tonight, we will do a meeting on what will be called the Bartonell Landing Project at the corner of McNear and Petaluma Boulevard South, down next to the Veterans Building. In fact, the developer of that was on the call for a while, has now disappeared, but hope you can join us again in 2 weeks and bring friends. Thanks for coming.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Take care.